raise your hand. Dr. Sheffield is a medical director of community health for Intermountain Healthcare. And we think this is going to be an enlightening and interesting discussion today. And so we appreciate both of them being here, and we appreciate you as well. About 50 years ago, in 1964, was a monumental report that was issued. And this was the first time that a report had been linked, smoking, I'm sorry, let me just get this. Okay. So this was the Surgeon General's report issued in January of 1964, and it was the first official report, government report, linking smoking with cancer. Well, here's what we know about cancer today, which should not be very shocking. We know smoking causes cancer and many more ill health effects. We know it has a dramatic effect and causes emphysema. We know it has a causal effect on stroke, and we know smoking has a direct effect on heart disease. We know that smokers die 10 years earlier than non-smokers in our society. And we know that if you quit tobacco use of any kind, that it can increase and enhance your health significantly. This will be the focus of today's debate between Dr. Joy and Dr. Sheffield regarding smoking and whether the new smoking of our generation is actually sedentary lifestyles, sitting, or too much sugar, our dietary effects. So with that, let's have you come up. And we prearranged to have Dr. Joy begin the first discussion point.
Okay.
And we'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think by the end of our presentation today, what you're going to think is the new smoking is both sitting and too much sugar. But we'll let you decide. So what I'm going to talk about today is sitting the new smoking. And you're all very familiar with the picture of the cigarette with the red line through it. But I'd argue that the new picture, the picture for the 21st century, ought to be the chair with the red line through it. And in particular, the easy chair. Now, in my office, I actually don't use a chair. I have some chairs in my office, but they're really just for guests. In my office, I have a treadmill desk. In fact, not only do I have one treadmill desk, but I have two. Because I am so committed to not only talking the talk about the dangers of sitting, but I think it's really important to walk the walk. Now, what you see here is me walking at 1.2 miles per hour. And this is the speed that I walk at when I'm at work. And if I had my laptop here, I'd be typing away and answering emails and talking on the phone and taking notes. And, you know, I can do so chewing gum and talking at the same time. So none of you ever walk this slow. This is so slow. You walk faster than this from your bedroom to the bathroom. You know, you walk faster than this walking to the refrigerator in your kitchen. So this isn't really exercise, it's just movement. And what you're going to hear from me today is that, you know, all movement, for the most part, is good movement, and it's going to protect your health. So, how much do we move now? Do you guys think that, for the most part, Americans are meeting recommended levels for physical activity? What do you think? Yes? No. And right you are. Americans are not active enough. I want you to focus your attention over here on the far left-hand side. And this is looking at the percent of adults who meet recommended levels of physical activity. I'm wondering if we can turn the lights down just a tiny bit. It'll make it a little bit easier to see the slides. So what this is telling us, sadly, is that only about 21% of men and less than 15% of women are meeting recommended levels of physical activity. 21% of men, less than 15% of women. There's some room for improvement, right? All right, how about kids? You know, we're so worried about this childhood obesity epidemic. You know, and certainly inappropriate dietary intake plays a role in childhood obesity. You know, but I'd also argue that inadequate physical activity, the other side of that energy balance equation, plays a huge role, a huge role. So this is looking at kids. What you see here are kids, both boys and girls, then boys, then girls, at age 6 through 11. How many kids in that age group are achieving 60 minutes a day of vigorous physical activity? And you can see that the combined total is about 42%, so less than half of 6 to 11-year-olds are meeting recommended physical activity levels. I mean, that's not so good, but wait, it gets worse. So by the time, you see kids entering puberty, it's way down here, where you've got only about 8% of 12 to 15-year-olds who are meeting recommended physical activity levels. And of course, it drops even further as they get into their older teen years. So we have a big problem. Kids aren't getting even close to the recommended levels of physical activity. And there are so many reasons for that. One has to do with the fact that we have essentially eliminated physical education from schools because of No Child Left Behind. Now, many of us in the fitness industry, in the health and fitness and wellness, we say, you know what? That law ought to be no child with a big behind. And so we need to really support an increase in physical activity opportunities for kids in terms of active transportation to school, physical education throughout the day, movement in the classroom, and after-school programs, both in terms of sports and recreation activities that allow kids to be more active. And did you guys know that there's a really strong relationship between a physically active and a physically fit child and academic performance? It's a linear relationship. So the more active and the more fit a child is, the more they learn. You optimize the learning environment when you create opportunities for them to be active. So active bodies, guess what? Active brains. So when you go back into your communities, and have an opportunity to talk to your PTA leaders, and when you have an opportunity to talk to your local government officials, don't forget to tell them, hey, Paul Ray, hey, Eric Hutchings, hey, PTA president, hey, Becky Lockhart, guess what? Active bodies lead to active minds. I digress. Okay, so it turns out that while kids are being less active, guess what they're doing? They're sitting more. And as we, again, use that same age range, starting at 6 to 11, you see a steady increase in time spent sitting and time spent in sedentary behavior. How about physical activity and screen time? We've heard a lot about that. Now, would you have guessed that 60% of children get more than 2 hours of screen time each day? Yet, our recommendation is, of course, they get less than 2 hours of quote-unquote recreational screen time when you combine both the time they spend on their laptops or their iPads and watching TV. Now, this chart over on the far left-hand side, or far right-hand side, let me walk you through this. So what we see here is that as the amount of time spent doing vigorous activity decreases, moving from right to left, BMI, or body mass index, goes up. If we look at the amount of time spent watching TV, as that increases, we also see BMI go up. And when you combine both of them together, look what you get. So decreasing activity and increasing sedentary time, not surprisingly, contribute significantly to the risk of childhood obesity. This was a study that was actually published a little over a year ago that was looking at global deaths that could be attributed to physical inactivity. It was done by a woman named Iman Lee at Harvard. And what they found in their statistical model was that physical inactivity causes nearly 1 in 10 premature deaths. 1 in 10. And if we could decrease inactivity by just 25%, we could avert more than 1.3 million deaths worldwide each year. So sitting is, in fact, the new smoking. This is some work done by Steve Blair. Steve Blair is an epidemiologist at the University of South Carolina, formerly at the Cooper Clinic down in Dallas. I'm sure some of you have heard of Ken Cooper and the Cooper Clinic. But this is some work he did. He followed a cohort of about 16,000 adults, so a group of 16,000 adults over 25 years, and he looked at the various things that contributed to their death. I mean, we're all going to die of something, but you know, what is it that's going to be the biggest risk factor? So obesity is bad, right? Smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, those are all really bad. But what's this low CRF? That seems to be the worst, right? That's low cardiorespiratory fitness. So low cardiorespiratory fitness, you know, as a risk factor for a premature death, far exceeded obesity. Look at the difference between obesity and low CRF, low fitness. It was a lot more than smoking, a little bit worse than hypertension, a lot more than high cholesterol. Pfizer would be saddened to hear that. And then, of course, there's diabetes, which, you know, is really bad too. But the point is that, you know, if you can be fit, even if you are obese, if you're fit and you smoke, you know, to be honest, fitness trumps everything. So sitting is the new smoking. This is another way of slicing and dicing that data I just showed you. Now it's looking at fitness by your weight category. So this first green bars here are normal weight individuals. The middle bars here in pink are people who we would consider overweight. And on the far right are people we would consider obese. And what we're looking at now is different fitness categories within those weight categories. And what this basically shows us is that if you have moderate high fitness, but you are obese, my pointer's not working when I'm walking, your risk of dying prematurely from coronary vascular disease is half that of somebody who is normal weight but is unfit. So being fit and fat is better than being unfit and skinny. So which matters more, fitness or fatness? Fitness. Woo! All right. Okay, we sit a lot, and it's killing us. So can, in fact, sitting cause premature mortality? You know, is it an independent risk factor? Well, this is a really large study. It included over 100,000 individuals, both men and women. They were followed for 14 years, you know, and they looked again at various factors that may be contributing to their premature mortality. And after they adjusted in their statistical model for all sorts of things like weight and smoking, what they found was that time spent sitting was associated with a higher risk of mortality in both men and women. In fact, the risk was actually a little higher in women than it was in men. And that was despite 30 minutes of regular exercise. So what they found was that 30 minutes of exercise can't undo 6 hours of sitting. So is sitting the new smoking? This is a study, again, that came from that article in the Lancet that I referred to previously that, again, looked at global deaths per year attributed to a number of different behaviors. This one is comparing smoking and inactivity. And I will, you know, acknowledge the fact that in this particular analysis, those who were inactive exceeded those who smoked. But I want to just draw your attention to the far right-hand side, looking at global deaths per year, and what you see is that there are 5.1 million global deaths per year from smoking and 5.3 million global deaths a year from being inactive. So I know most of you in this audience wouldn't even consider putting a cigarette to your lips. But how many of you end up sitting, on average, 6 hours a day or more? Probably a lot of us. So how much is enough? You know, I just got done saying that, you know, regular exercise doesn't trump sitting all day long, and that's true. But we want people to attain at least 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise or a brisk walk, or 75 minutes a week of vigorous exercise, which might be jogging or hiking or biking. We also want people to get out of their chair and off the couch, and to also live an active life. Walk your dog. Choose active transportation when possible. You know, work hard in your garden and dig up plants all day. There's also other strategies that you can engage in to try and reduce your sedentary behavior. Aim for less than 2 hours per day of screen time. Aim for less than 6 hours of total sitting time per day. And when you are sitting, get up and move around. There's actually some small studies that show that if you have a job that requires you to sit, if you get up and move for 2 to 3 minutes every 30 to 60 minutes, it actually lowers your blood glucose level. So it may reduce your risk of getting diabetes. So I would encourage you, and you don't have to walk fast. So again, these are some strategies that you can use to try and integrate and re-engineer more activity into your life. So in summary, there is conclusive evidence that 150 minutes a week of moderate to vigorous physical activity reduces your likelihood of a premature death from all causes. When it comes to physical activity, I think there's a phrase that kind of I use to describe it to my patients and my colleagues, that none is bad, some is good, and in general, more is better. That fitness matters more than fatness. Time spent sitting is an independent predictor of mortality. And really, the new exercise prescription is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a week, plus movement throughout the day to avoid prolonged sitting. Now I'm going to leave you with just one more slide that hopefully you will remember. And you can take this home to your families, to your friends, to your communities. And it's this: exercise is medicine. Sitting is in fact the new smoking. Walking, not the dog, is man's best friend. And the risk of doing nothing far exceeds any risk from a brisk walk. So thank you very much. Hey, Jess?
Yes.
Let's see. Before we let Tamara have the podium, I want to just ask the audience, if I have convinced you that sitting is the new smoking, stand up. Oh, Tamara, good luck.
Let's give Dr. Joy a hand and a foot after all that time on the treadmill. Is it calculating how much distance you covered?
Well, let's see. So far, it says that I have done, well, I think it's possible that somebody was on this before I did, because it said I did 2,200 steps, and I don't think I've walked quite that much in 15 minutes. But just to give you an example, so the ideal is about 10,000 steps per day. And so me and my friend, we've walked 2,200 so far, and that's burned about 100 calories. So typically for me, with my stride length, I walk about 10,000 steps in 3 miles. And 3 miles is about what we also recommend, you know, for fitness. So that all kind of works out. Funny how it all kind of works out that way.
Well, thank you very much. A very compelling argument that sitting is the new smoking. And now we welcome Dr. Sheffield, who will be talking about whether sugar is the new smoking. Dr. Sheffield. Yep. Joy. Dr. Joy has that.
We good? Okay, great. I have, you know, we've kind of put this together as a debate, and it's really hard to debate someone when you agree with everything they say. But I will try and bring up one point here. You see, Liz has talked about how the effect of inactivity is the same as the effect of smoking in terms of what it does for your health. And what I'm going to be talking about, why I think sugar is the new smoking, is that sugar is, I'm going to really be discussing how sugar interrelates with your body at the cellular level and how it impacts your body very similarly to tobacco. Okay, so we're going to be talking, you know, not necessarily your long-term outcome, but how it actually acts with you. So these are the two things that I think we can agree tobacco is. We know tobacco is toxic. We're losing a jumbo jet worth of people every day to tobacco, okay? In terms of our increased death rate, for people who are smoking, 1 out of every 2 of them will die from their smoking. We know it's a toxic substance that we're using. And the other thing that we also know is that tobacco is highly addictive. We're essentially taking nicotine and with a whole lot of other chemicals around it, freebasing that up to your brain. And the interesting thing is, you know, with an addiction, what you're doing is you actually change your brain. You change the way it works at the cellular level. And it likes something, it says, oh, this is good. So it builds more receptor sites. So what happens, you start smoking, you start building more and more nicotine receptor sites up there in your brain. And all of a sudden, if you don't feed it with the nicotine, it starts kind of screaming at you and saying, I need this. So we've got, you know, tobacco's an addictive substance. Now what about sugar? I would say that sugar, yes, it can be addictive depending on how we use it. And it may be, it can be toxic. And we are finding ways where it may be addictive as well. So let's talk about that. The first thing I want to make sure is that we don't have like the news media running out and saying, sugar is a poison, don't be using sugar. It's a core feature of our diet. A lot of people are out there saying, remove all carbs from your diet. Sugar's a carb. We have these carbohydrates, but sugar does not equal carbohydrates. There are lots of different kinds of carbohydrates. We are made up, even down to our DNA, there's carbohydrate in that DNA. Okay, so carbs are good. And also, one type of sugar doesn't always equal exactly another type of sugar. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the differences and what I'm talking about. I'm talking about added sugars, and these are what we call the simple sugars, the simple processed ones. Those are your monosaccharides. So sugar is actually this kind of circular molecule of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, basic building blocks of our bodies. But that it's configured in a little circle. One circle is a monosaccharide, two circles put together are disaccharides, and then we get these polysaccharides, lots and lots of those circles put together. And the ones that we're going to be talking about, sucrose is a disaccharide. It has two of those circles. That is table sugar. And it's made up of one monosaccharide, glucose, and one monosaccharide, fructose. Okay? Lactose has no fructose in it. It's actually one monosaccharide, glucose, and one monosaccharide, galactose, hooked together to become lactose. So the starches, the fibers, the glycogen, all of those things that store up sugar in our body, we actually promote use of those. About 60% of our diet ought to be that. And one of the problems we've seen, though, is that we've shifted our dietary habits. Back around the 1970s, a lot of things kind of came up. We realized that the wrong kinds of fats caused more heart disease. And we as Americans, it's like we hear one thing, just like I'm telling you right now, sugar bad, we heard fat bad, and we removed all the good fats as well as the bad fats from our diet. And the food industry, knowing that fats are what we could put good taste into food with, said, well, we gotta have something else that tastes good. So they started pumping sugar in as the replacement for fats. And what we're talking about is we need to kind of rebalance our thinking and rebalance what we're getting in those processed foods, because now by removing the fats and sticking all those sugars in, we're getting some pretty bad outcomes health-wise. So here we're looking at this week, it came out in JAMA, new study talking about those who eat lower amounts of added sugar versus a medium amount and high amounts. And what we're finding is that if you're eating 10 to 25% of your calories in those simple added sugars, you've just upped your risk of dying early by 30%. And if you're in that group, who 10% of the people that they were studying, about 10% of our population, is eating about 25% of their calories in simple sugars added to their foods, that's tripling their risk of dying early. Okay, toxic. Sugars can be toxic when used inappropriately. What happens? Why do we do this? Well, first off, we get this taste. We've got these taste receptors in our tongues that this is a mechanism that really helped us survive, because man, fruits are a great packaging together of all the vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and sugars you need, because we need sugar to survive. We need carbohydrates appropriately packaged together to help that our bodies process appropriately to feed us. I mean, the only thing that feeds our brain is glucose. Okay? Glucose is the only thing that the brain uses for its energy, and we sure need our brains to function. So we'd better be having glucose. But you don't want it packaged as just straight glucose that just rushes right to your brain. That's what happens. We get this taste that says sweet, so we like sweet. It actually gives, because most foods that have energy in them have some kind of sweet to it. The problem is dopamine is also in our brain, and this is the pleasure center. Dopamine is the thing that says, oh, this feels so good. And so we start throwing off dopamine like crazy when we get that taste sensation that's sweet. And just like with smoking that has those nicotine receptors, it's that same thing. It throws off dopamine and tells us, oh, this feels good. Let's keep doing it, and I want more of it. So in a sugar-laden society, dopamine can be our enemy a little bit, because we have these signals that say we want this. There's also signals as that sugar now starts going through your body into your gut. We've got a couple of things called leptin and ghrelin that we're learning about. And these are hormones from your gut that tell you, should I be hungry and eat more, or have I eaten enough and it's time to stop? Well, leptin says, hey, let's stop, had enough. And the problem is sugar, when you're eating a lot of it, can kind of tone down the leptin and tell the cells, don't listen to leptin. You need to keep feeling hungry, even though you've eaten. You may be full, but, oh, I still feel hungry. Also, we've got ghrelin in there, that's the hunger hormone. It stimulates that. So where other foods and other feelings of fullness can help your body think, I am done, I'm not hungry anymore, sugar can kind of work counteractive to that. Also, we're aware that insulin is actually really beneficial for us to help us deal with sugar, okay? When we have sugars that get into our bloodstream, if they're left in the blood to keep circulating around, they can damage your organs if you have too much glucose in your blood. Too much glucose, it's going to wreck your kidneys, make your eyes, microvascular disease in your eyes, help you get infections. This glucose is something that you need to move out of your blood and into the muscles and the brain and the places where it's going to use it appropriately. And insulin is the thing that moves it. It's kind of like your doorman that opens the door and says, okay, here's your glucose, move it out of the blood and into those cells. Well, the problem is, if you've been throwing all these people at him, he's opening that door so fast that finally the hinges kind of wear out, and you can't open it anymore. It gets this resistance, and all of a sudden you can't get the glucose out of your blood and into your cells. That's when you get diabetes type 2, is that you become insulin resistant. Your insulin just doesn't work anymore. It can't open that door for you. So too much sugar and consuming all of this added sugar makes it so we get insulin resistant, and that's where our diabetes happens. Now, where are we getting all this sugar from? We pretty much know that there's some key places here, both in foods and in beverages. Your sweets and desserts, your sugar-sweetened beverages, not only are we seeing effects of heart disease, concerns about diabetes, but weight gain. These are some of the key ones where, in consumed over a period of time, you will be gaining the pounds along with it. And what's happened to us since the 70s, or even earlier? Soft drink calories per day. Look at this. This is from 1977, about a 25-year period there, from 50 to 3 times the calories that we used to consume from sweetened drinks we're now consuming. Fruit drinks, doubling. At the same time, milk, which is a different kind of sugar, processes differently, and doesn't tend to give us as much of that effect and is balanced out by the protein and fat in the milk, it's gone way down. And in fact, for weight loss, one of the things that we promote, water and a few servings of milk a day. All right, largest drop in milk consumption was in our teens, while their soft drink and food consumption doubled. So we've seen that kind of societal shift in what we're drinking. And we have actually some illustrations out in the hall, but this is your cubes of sugar. How much is in there? And you're thinking, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to avoid the soft drinks. I'll just drink lemonade. No, it's about the same amount. Well, then I'll just drink chocolate milk. We've said kids won't drink milk at school, therefore we will give them chocolate milk at school. We've just essentially said we're going to just dump a whole ton load of sugar into them and make that a, quote, healthy drink. Not the case. Nope, that's not healthy. Well, I'm going to go get my fruit servings by going to Jamba Juice. Problem. We've got just as much sugar they're dumping into that too. And here's the granddaddy of all things. You go to McDonald's, you want to get yourself a shake. This is your 20 ounces, like your 20-ounce soda, only it's got about double the sugar in there. 400 calories. That's about a fourth of the calories for your whole day that you've got to be eating. It's 57% of the calories in that little glass there are made of straight out, right there, sugar. More than you would get in drinking a liter of Coke. Okay, so other things about toxic. Yes, and this is looking country by country. Just like in the last lecture, they were saying that that wonderful pristine area that had longevity is now getting infiltrated by modern Western foods. Here's the deal, is when we look country by country, your availability to sugar, for every kind of amount of a soft drink per day that you have available to you, there's a 1.1% increase in that population in diabetes. And is it available? This is the thing that scared me to death when I read it. Of the 600,000 items that we have in our food supply, 80% of those have added sugars to it. Because the food industry knows that's what turns on all of our mechanisms to make us want to eat more of it. Okay? This is specific to fructose, but same idea with glucose as well, because if you're eating table sugar, you're getting 1 glucose, 1 fructose. If you're getting high fructose corn syrup, you're just getting a little different proportions of that, but it's still glucose and fructose together. And prior to what we should be seeing is, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, you're going to get about 15 grams of good fructose, all combined with those phytochemicals and those great things that we want to have in our bodies. And prior to World War II, we were getting a little bit extra in our day besides that. All of a sudden, we hit 1977, and we've got 37 grams. 1994, almost 55 grams. And our adolescents are up to about 72 grams. 12% of the total calories they're getting that day is that fructose. That's not even the glucose that we're getting too. And 25% consumed at least 15% of their calories. We are changing our whole diet pattern. And why are we doing it? Because our bodies are getting the signals that say, this stuff's great, keep doing it. Although I would propose that that's not necessarily the right signal. And we have to start doing, and this is what we can do. We can start listening a little better and differentiating in our body the idea of need and desire from hunger, okay? And starting to listen to a little bit better those signals. We have the ability to distinguish this. And it's really interesting, and I'm going to talk about me as the poster child. Liz is the poster child for walking and moving. I'm the poster child for sugar addiction, okay? When I was a kid, my dad would take us on these trips. First thing in the morning, as a treat, because we never got this at home, he would bring out the sweet rolls and the sugar pie type of things for breakfast. And he didn't understand this. He thought I was being a picky eater. I would get sick as a dog eating that stuff in the morning. It would make me feel bad, and I didn't like it. But that didn't stop me from wanting sugar and consuming sugar. Okay, this is the point of addiction. Something that you try, like maybe a cigarette, that makes you feel sick to your stomach and nauseated and cough and all that other stuff, but you do it again? What up with that? Why do we do that with something that makes us not feel good? Because there are other mechanisms. It's that war between what our bodies feel is vigorous and healthful and what our brains tell us, oh man, I love dopamine, and I love what you're doing when you're sending that off. So for an addiction, this is what we see with tobacco. That tolerance means I need more and more of it because I've now made all these new receptors in my brain to nicotine, and I need you to feed those receptors to make me to continue to feel good and not feel bad. And so that's where we get withdrawal if we don't put that in. So we use more than intended. Now, how many of you feel like you use more sugar than you intend? Okay. We're going to get some people here standing up, too. And then I intend or I fail to limit those things. It's like I really know I want to limit the sugar content, and I failed to do it. I had an intent. I knew I was going to do it, and I couldn't make it happen. I spend a lot of time trying to recover from that, trying to get that exercise for the extra pounds that I put on because I've been consuming something I knew I shouldn't be doing. And then there's negative consequences, which we just talked about. And regardless of those consequences, we keep using. Regardless of my diabetes, regardless of the fact that I have a warning about heart disease, regardless of the fact that I have put on the 1 pound per year for the last 20 years, I'm still consuming a ton of sugar. And so this is where I would say again, sugar is the new tobacco. So even if we can't say necessarily that the science is working on this, they're finding that definitely it's addictive in animal studies. It's hard to tease this out on how addictive is this in the human population, but it definitely is abused. We eat more than is healthy for us. So I would encourage us, we can say, if I eat something, do I feel vigorous and energized? And how does that feel versus do I eat this and I just kind of feel this rush of, oh, good, I've met a need, okay? There's meeting a need, and you can tell that difference. I've just eaten dinner, I'm feeling full, and it just doesn't feel right because I don't have this nice little sweet taste in my mouth at the end. I gotta have something more, but I'm full. But there's always room for ice cream. There's always room for that little burst of that sugar thing because it just kind of fits between the cracks. We will consume those more calories even when our bodies are telling us we're not full because our brains are wired for that. One thing that here's the site that I've got for you. If you look up on the web TED Talks, why sugar makes us feel so good, they'll tell you even better and in a fun way how sugar interrelates with your body. So how is it like tobacco? I think we've convinced ourselves it is harmful to our health when eaten wrong. When we get added sugars that are unnecessary calories that actually are not coming along with that fiber that we need and the phytochemicals and the minerals and all those great things, we just purified it down to pure pleasure signal going to our brain. And it doesn't have that nutritional value. We market this like crazy to our population, just like we do tobacco, okay? And by the way, in the 70s and 80s, who bought all the food companies? RJR, Nabisco, that's RJ Reynolds, the tobacco company. RJR Nabisco. Who bought Kraft? Philip Morris, tobacco company. All the tobacco companies who really knew how to interact with our brains brought all that great science into the food industry and said, I will package an Oreo, which is the perfect sugar delivery device. And guess what? I'm going to hook you on this, and you will be a lifetime user. Okay. So we have a lot of the things that we've learned from how to make us purchase and consume cigarettes, how to purchase and consume sugar. So we get our customers hooked, they become loyal. And I don't want to leave you with despair. I want to give you some things that we can do. So what can we do? Understand the difference between what makes me feel good from a brain standpoint and what makes me feel healthy. And avoid those sugar-laden foods. Avoid your sweetened drinks, the processed foods, and also, I mean, you can limit what you put in terms of your sugars. You can always reduce those in your recipes. Eat your whole fruits, again, lots of vegetables, and make sure your starchy foods have as much fiber as possible for how it will process. And then learn about which foods are in the Mediterranean diet. I'm just throwing out a whole new term here. But look up Mediterranean diet. It's giving you the healthy fats. It's giving you the unlimited sugars as well. Now, I hope, have I convinced anyone here that sugar is the new tobacco? Okay, so I've got a pretty good group here. Inactivity and sugar. And what I wanted to do, and I asked for this, I said, can I have to please rant at the end? Tobacco is not old. it's still there. All right, and I still see the effects and the ravages of the people that I work with who are addicted to tobacco. And so I said, I wanted to, you know, we still have 10%, 1 out of 10 of the people in Utah are still using tobacco as adults. Half of them are going to die from that. That's unacceptable. And if they stop, we reduce the rate to 1 in 10 of them will still die from what they did in the past. But that's really helping their odds. We're losing our youth to this new thing called e-cigarettes that just like when the physicians were out there saying, you know, tobacco's really good for you. And we've got this whole new science. Well, let's do something that's less toxic, only there's no evidence to say yet how toxic it is. We don't have the studies to tell us. But they're packaging nicotine as a freebasing device. I'm going to vaporize nicotine, send it straight to your brain, and get all those receptors hooked on nicotine again in your brain, build all those receptor sites. And who's using it? It's our kids. They're like, yeah, I don't want to start this smelly smoking thing. But 6% of our kids are using e-cigarettes, and only 4% of them are using cigarettes. In the last 2 years, the e-cigarette use has tripled in kids. And it's done at 3 times the rate of the adults. We have 1/3 of the youth who are using that have never used any other tobacco product. This is our new gateway into tobacco addiction. And if they can't get the e-cigarette, guess where we're going to go? To the regular cigarettes. So I would let you know, please be aware we have a new threat because we had gotten to a point where our kids had were really getting down to low rates, and it's popping right back up again with e-cigarette use. So our point is, inactivity, sugar, inappropriately used, it's going to kill us. But we have the power to be aware and make those kind of changes, and they're hard because they're so based through our population, but we do have the power to make that change.
Thank you, Dr. Sheffield. Well, we're going to open it up to some of your questions right now. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Joy and Dr. Sheffield? Yes, please. Go ahead and take that out. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks.
What about Splenda? Is it safe? What is the science, and how does it interact with dopamine and insulin?
Right. Really good question. There are a lot of sugar substitutes out there. And again, just like e-cigarettes, we're a little bit short on some of the science behind them. The assumption is if we're not giving you the calories, you're not gaining weight. But we still don't know whether the sensation of sweet actually enhances your calorie consumption. We have found out that even, you have your soft drinks that cause overconsumption of calories that are sugar-laden. Well, we still get some of the same effect with diet drinks. And we don't know if it's the carbonation or if it's the sweet effect that's actually turning on our insulin, even though we don't have sugar in there. So what we do know is the final result is people who drink a diet soda consume more calories after they drink it than they would have if they drank water. So again, we don't have something to tell us. But my suspicion is if we're trying to fool the brain probably might get fooled. And it may turn on a lot of those other hormones that still give us some of those same effects. So I would say teaching your body to avoid so much sweet and that addiction to sweetness is probably not a bad thing to do.
More questions? Right here in the middle. Go ahead.
Pardon? It was probably pretty much the same kind of question. Each one of these sweeteners, what they do is they allow you to have a lower amount of calories for a higher sweetness factor. And I guess my number one thing is avoid adding as much of those things as possible. Watch how your body reacts to it. But if you need it to help you wean off of regular sugar, use it as a way to get off. But then I'd say, why add that either?
There was a question. Sir, you had a question? Right there? Mm-hmm.
Sure, that's a great question, and I actually get it by email quite often.
Dr. Joy, why don't you repeat the question so everybody can hear?
So the question had to do with, if you're going to be using a treadmill workstation at your work, are employers actually buying into this concept? And I think the answer is mixed. It's a relatively new intervention, into the work setting. I think that employers are gradually coming on board with the concept. Some companies are purchasing a treadmill workstation like this one for multiple users. So again, not promoting a single product, but this one is adjustable. So I can move it up or down for different sized individuals. So I can move it down for someone who's short, or up for someone who is tall. And imagine, putting a docking station here and having a monitor, and then you've got your phone, or you bring your cell phone. So the desks are used with the idea in mind that it may not be one single treadmill desk per user, but it may be that, you sign up and have a 2-hour block. You get 8 to 10, and you get 10 to 12, and you get 12 to 2, and you get 2 to 6. But the idea is that it doesn't have to be an inordinate expense. The other question I'm often asked about is safety. And I actually comb the literature pretty regularly on this, because people are thinking, well, will I fall off? Will I tear my ACL working? I typically respond to people like this. So just think and say, when's the last time you tripped over your toilet? Anybody? Anybody want to admit that? So the bathroom is a very complicated space, right? You've got the sink and the toilet and the shower, or maybe a bathtub and the vanity and blah, blah, blah. So that's a really complicated space, but yet no one in this room has tripped over their toilet, at least that they'll admit to. So the same thing is true with the treadmill workstation. So, it's like anything else. You just get used to being on it. And the likelihood of actually having an accident while you're on it is very low. And as I'm working on it during the day at 1.2 miles an hour, and somebody comes into my office, I just kind of ride it off, and I get back on. And sometimes I walk sideways. And sometimes I get bored and I walk backwards. So, it is a more complicated environment than sitting in your chair, but it's a much more healthy environment. And I have yet to see anyone publish any data to say that it's an injury risk. So the long answer to your short question is that the acceptance of this in the work environment is growing. And there are some companies that are investing in this in a big way for their employees as a way to improve their health, reduce their healthcare utilization and their costs, lower their health insurance costs for the company, and expand presenteeism, how present they are doing their work. Because if kids move more and they do better in math, I'm just guessing that if I move more, I'm going to do better with outcomes research. Yeah, we have not really done that yet. As an organization, we're not invested in the treadmill desk, but I would encourage you, to look, as Dr. Sheffield said, to look on Google. There's a tremendous wealth of information about the value, particularly from some of the vendors who make the treadmill workstations. I'm not at liberty to say who those are, but ask me later.
Okay, a couple more questions. I know you, let's see, hold on. I know we had some in the background. I want to get everybody. No other questions there? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay. Is the small glass of fresh orange juice okay to eat every day, or is that too much?
Okay, the question was, and this is a really good one about juices, and is a small glass of freshly squozen juice okay for you in a day? And again, the question really relates to, well, what else are you eating all that day? okay? If it's the only juice you've had, we actually say 6 ounces of juice probably is not giving you too much sugar, and you're getting some good your phytochemicals again and your vitamins. But, be aware, it will increase your hunger signals, okay? So if you're in the process of weight loss, maybe not a good strategy for you. But if you're maintaining weight, weight's not a concern for you. Actually, a little bit of juice, fine in a day, a healthy thing. But it's, eating that whole fruit with all the fiber included, and you haven't pulled all that pulp and fiber out, your body processes it better, and it's healthier for you than the straight juice.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? You have one? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris and tobacco and e-cigarettes, and my question is, do you know who accepts hundreds of thousands of dollars from those companies? Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch. Sorry for that, but I wanted to point that out.
Okay. Question here on the end.
What about just standing? Getting your people boxes up and just, is that obviously more beneficial than sitting?
Yeah, so the question is standing better than sitting? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. And actually some of the original work on that was done by an endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic named Jim Levine. And Jim Levine is obviously, working with people with diabetes, and, they have conditions that may be a consequence of energy balance, meaning that you're taking more energy in than you are putting out. And, he did some studies and showed that people burn more calories just standing compared to sitting. And he thought, well, if standing is better than sitting, I bet walking is better than standing. And that was really the evolution of the treadmill desk. But I'd also think that not only are there additional benefits from an energy balance perspective, but there are other benefits from standing and walking compared to sitting. And I'm from Minnesota, if you hadn't noticed from my accent. But I want you to think about the spine. And the spine in Minnesota is 2 hockey pucks with a jelly donut. And so imagine, the way that we get blood and nutrients to the discs, aka the jelly donuts, is with movement. It's the loading and unloading and loading and unloading, of the jelly donut, of the disc, that actually promotes good humors in, bad humors out. And so we have an epidemic of degenerative disc disease. I mean, how many of you in the audience, have low back problems? A lot. And I'd argue that a lot of our low back disease is caused from sitting. Because when we're sitting, guess what? We're not encouraging good humors in and bad humors out, because we're just sitting. And so the discs don't get oxygenated, they don't get the good blood glucose that Dr. Sheffield was talking about, and so our discs tend to degenerate. So I think another really good benefit of standing and walking is that it promotes spine health. And degenerative disc disease is so common and it's so debilitating. And then when your back hurts, guess what? You sit more and you eat more sugar. So we want people to stand, we want them to move more, we want them to make healthier choices. And guess what? We'll all live longer, we'll have higher quality lives, and it'll be good.
And I'll just do a shout out here to Dr. Joy. I don't have a walking desk, but I've just had a newly installed standing desk because of her. Okay, she has been an inspiration around our company as well. And so I can tell you right now, after having stood for a couple of weeks, I am much more likely to walk around my office, having been standing and working, than I was, and going out and getting things and wandering around, than I was when I was sitting and had to get up to go and do things.
Right.
So true. It makes me think of your conversation with the gentleman about, a 6-ounce glass of orange juice. It's kind of the gateway drug to, more unhealthy dietary intake for some, whereas sitting, promotes even more sedentary activity.
Great.
Well, I think that the standing and eating has less to do with energy balance and more having to do with just not being very mindful with what it is you're putting in your body. And I'll just say that for me, that's one of the only times I sit during my day, is when I'm having lunch.
Well, we're going to end the conversation with one question for Dr. Sheffield, and that's for me, to help me. So much sugar is already in our foods. Help us understand when we go shopping, understand labels. What are we looking for to really be as healthy as possible? What should we be aware of, and how do we effectively read the labels to be informed consumers?
Okay, that is a great question. And if you need more time on that, there's some dietitians actually teaching label reading down the hall. But what you're looking for is not just this list over here on the simple sugars, where it just says sugar amount in grams. You want to look at fiber down below and make sure you've got as much fiber in there as possible. And then look over in the ingredient side. And when it says sucrose, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, fructose, dextrose, anything that's ose. Just get the oses out of the food that you're buying there, because, and you will be amazed. I mean, we were just looking at our favorite salsa because we were saying, oh yeah, we know ketchup has it. We know now, you know, all these great healthy tomato foods. Our favorite salsa, sugar right there. And my husband just went, oh, gotta find a new brand now. But it's there. You can, and the more that you go with the brand that the grocery store made right there, made fresh that day, a lot more of those have the sugars out of them. Okay, so find yourself, look at your labels again for the oses, and as much as you can just eat simply your own fruits and vegetables. Make your, you know, it's time, but that time also gives you time to think and stress and move around your kitchen. We're just asking us, you know, our parents lived pretty good lives. Let's live a little bit more like they did.
Yeah. Dr. Joy, Dr. Sheffield, thank you so much. Deidre, if you come up real quickly. We have